Welcome to Cycles TV. This session of the Market Cycles Report is intended exclusively to provide information and education to help individuals better understand cycles and the markets. However, this information is not to be construed as professional advice as to the buying and selling of securities. In no event does the host express any opinion with respect to, or make recommendations regarding, the purchase or sale of any particular investment instrument. There is a very high degree of risk involved in trading. Buying or selling decisions are solely within the personal discretion of each individual. And now, enjoy the show. Here is your host.
Lars von Thienen. Welcome to Cycles TV once again. Thanks for joining. Today I needed to pre-record that session, so please excuse for that. It does not allow me to do this live today, but just to be sure on that. Today, I want to give an update. I mean, this is very experimental, but I mean, we need to talk about Nvidia and we need to spend some time, at least to have a look at cycles. As a disclaimer, I need to tell you upfront, I would always be careful with doing individual cycle analysis just on one single stock. Yeah, because that's not as easy. Individual analysis of cycles in stocks involves that there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of sharp individual moves, maybe in the underlying data set, which makes cycle detection even more complicated. So in terms of an engineer, you would rate the noise ratio very high in that kind of analysis. And if the noise ratio is very high, it gets harder and harder for the algorithms to really detect underlying important cycles. So said that upfront, that's a warning you always need to take into account when dealing with individual stocks or assets. And this individual noise level is more or less filtered out if you use indices or composite indices. Then you have less risk dealing with these noise. Yeah, so if you drill down into one specific asset, you have a higher noise ratio. So that's why at least stocks with not a lot of movement, not a lot of volatility, you should not use. And I mean, if we look now into Nvidia, I don't need to tell you anything about that chart, but I mean, what should we tell here? This is a pure exponential move to the upside. This is just a weekly chart. I mean, it's anyhow very hard for whatever analysis to analyze charts where you find exponential moves. They never end in a good way on the right side of the chart. However, you never know how high they go. But I will not talk about exponential moves here. I want to analyze that stock with you. Similar to Bitcoin. In Bitcoin, you also have a lot of exponential moves in the past from different offset levels. Seems to go Nvidia in that direction anyhow. But let's just apply our simple cycle tools on that asset. And therefore, I will walk you through that cycle analysis today. So as always recommended, we start with a long-term analysis. And this is also a good example to talk a little bit about detrending the data series, because it looks like as if Nvidia would just be a flat line for the past 20 years and just have that parabolic move. I mean, this is for sure the absolute data set, but what we are doing and introducing always in the pre-processing area of, and this applies to any cycle analysis tool set, there is some pre-processing. And in that case, pre-processing requires to have the detrended information. And what I'm showing here you is just the detrended information which is used for cycle detection, which means that this longer term trend and this exponential move is taken out of the equation first. So the red line here is the detrended version. And if you zoom in, yeah, you see that the detrended version is now more closely related to the important bottoms and tops, also argue from a relative point of view. Yeah, so here is the key top here in the detrended version for sure relates to that point here, while this low is aligned to this low here, this low is this low here, and then we have again, the top here. So that's a detrended data series. I think it's clear, right? So we don't take into account the absolute price swings, yeah, which have been very enormous from that point of view. But I think you get the message here. So we are, and we use cycles for the purpose of identifying important tops and bottoms from the current market situation. We do not predict that cycles will go up price-wise that huge amount here. But cycles could tell us, okay, here is a bottom and here could be a top by using this detrended series. So this is the pre-processed Nvidia stock price data set, detrended. So we take the huge trend out of the equation, and we can now also go through that data set here. You see, it is not taking into account if in the future there's this huge exponential up move here. So we can just use the timing period from 18 to 2022. So where we move to the 300, which was the top here, also in that data set, the low here. So even 100. So you see how this relates, and even this exponential move is not as exponential as you would assume here from the absolute series. So this very strong, let's call it very strong upward trend, which is the line here, is taken out of the equation. That's on detrending. So that's why you always need to be aware of that the cycle analyzer is using the detrended version because we want to identify the underlying rhythm cycles. We don't want to identify the larger trend where cycles are not used for. So therefore, and if you use the cycle analyzer, I just can recommend from time to time, switch these detrended visualization to on, which will plot you on the bottom the detrended version, so the pre-processed information before the cycle analysis engine is hit can be visualized by putting that on. So that's just set if you are dealing with that kind of data set. So first things first, we need to understand what is happening in the background. Second, you see that I have also added a little bit more of context or history, because you see the spectrum is not as nice as I would expect it, even with having these 1,300 weeks of analysis here and that kind. If you have a cross-check on that spectrum, and I mean that also applies to this strange behavior of the absolute price here, is that this is not a perfect spectrum. It's really not a perfect spectrum I would like, or we would like to see as a cycle analyst dealing with cycles. Yeah, so, and if we zoom in, you see we have 1, 2, 3 peaks here. I mean, these peaks are there from their, let me turn out that, 3 peaks here from that theoretical mathematical reading within that spectrum. 1, 2, 3. But you know from how to read a spectrum, maybe there's just one dominant cycle with 110, 120, 150 in there, which we don't have enough data to exactly specify or identify that long-term cycle. So we need to deal with these 3 different possibilities, and we even can generate a composite of that. But it's not perfect. So therefore, let's call today's session very experimental. The shorter term cycles from a weekly perspective, I would not take into account because the offset from the amplitude is too high. And also here to the right side, there's no real peak for real long-term cycles in Nvidia. So the only one which is somewhere here in between. So let's have a look at these cycles here. So as we cannot really rule out which one to trust here, let me zoom in a little bit more. I would start to go over all cycles from an individual point of view. So this is the longest one with a length of 148. So we can have then the second one with a length of 102. Both seem to indicate kind of topping. Yeah, so it doesn't matter if we use the 104 or the 148. Similar perspective, and the shortest one with 96 also close to topping. So these 3 cycles don't give us a complete different picture, so which is good. However, it's not a surprise. In these parabolic upswings, I would think about, we in most cases would find these cycles which are close to a top yet. So therefore, again, another indicator. Very careful with using that simplified analysis. But let's build a composite out of all 3 dominant cycles, as all 3 cycles could be judged as valid. And what we see now is a composite plot here of these 3 cycles, which is kind of key rhythm. So not 3 different rhythms which add up. It's a rhythm which is more or less breathing. And I think you got it as I've explained. This rhythm is more used on the detrended series, yeah, as due to the, so we should cross-check here on the detrended series with the bottoms and lows. That fits quite nicely, and we need to zoom in here a little bit more. So here's the top. Yeah, that works. So here we have the big top, 2022, the big bottom here, another interim top here, and the low here. Okay, so just a quick comparison between the composite plot, the real data, and the detrended one. Feels like, okay, the composite is a valid one to plot. I would now hide the detrended version here, and now let's look where we are using that long-term projection. Yeah, so quite in regards to the long-term cycles, quite some headwinds for Nvidia. So, and the key upturn from the long-term cycles seemed to have ended end of last year. I mean, you know, we moved from 500 to 900, so this is a very huge move in that topping area. And that's said, you never know when these exponential moves really end, but long-term cycle has come to an end for Nvidia. You always need to reference what happened in the past when these long-term cycles ended. So the last time this happened in 2021, we moved from 300 to 100. So the moves to the downside are not as extreme as the moves to the upside, but at least long-term cycle. Let's do the same now on the short-term perspective. So therefore we switch to a daily chart. Daily chart is here. That's the daily price chart. And the bottom, in that case, I used just the standard setting as always. We would open that chart with 850 daily bars, 2024, 4 years of daily data used in that case. You could do the same cross-check here if you're in the data set analyzing the detrended version. I will skip that here for saving some time for us. The key important cycles are then also shown in the spectrum. So the first one is identified here with a length of 80 days, trading days in that case. So this is a nice sharp peak in the spectrum with a very big green triangle, which means that we have a very good Baratelle score, which is a green triangle. First listed in the list here, so the highest strength, the highest influence on the price movements. It's also, and the visual shape in the spectrum then also gives the conclusion from our artificial algorithms. This is the most dominant cycle ranked. There is a second one which is also shown in the spectrum here at the bottom, the second one here with 95, which is closely related, but let's start with the 80 days cycle here in that case. So the rhythm, this is a short-term cycle, yeah, so we need to be closely looking to the short-term rhythm, which seems to be in alignment. I mean, we need to take into account the larger swings here, but here you see the top, the bottom, another top, bottom, top, yeah, not the final bottom, but here bottoming area here, topping, then here maybe bottoming, top, bottom. So if and here a nice bottom. So, and you know, if we connect these rhythms here, you see that the Nvidia price chart is in sync with the rhythm here. I mean, you know, the larger trend here to the downside and here to the upside is important, but we don't measure the absolute swing. So the shorter term underlying rhythm can be seen by that cycle. It seems to be also a moving cycle, and I would assume if I now bring in the second rated cycle with 95, yeah, you see this cycle is a little bit becoming more important and less important. That's the beauty of that composite. So you see here in that case, that cycle was very important for these three turns here, or the two bottom turns, maybe also this bottom here. And then that cycle faded out. Yeah, you see here during that period, that cycle, that short-term cycle did not help us in identifying bottom. So you see that just resulted in the strong up move. The shorter cycle, that was maybe seen here, but it was very small. So it faded. This short-term rhythm faded. So that's what the composite very nice tells us. So you see here, it's like an oscillating. It's one cycle, it's oscillating. At some times it becomes important. At sometimes this smaller cycle becomes less important. So that's also interesting to see when you add up different cycles here. So that's what I would have assumed. But if you use these two shorter cycles, that's the perspective. So we are now in a big move of that short-term cycle. So that's also interesting that this breathing short-term daily cycle seems also to roll over now with negative cyclic movement into April now for the next 4 weeks. This should always then be set into context of some technical analysis. So by using that analysis, we see here I have brought in our cyclic tuned RSI indicator, which shows us here also the trigger was generated. So we have a trigger to the downside from end of last week because it crossed below the upper band. And we should do now the same on the weekly and on the daily. So to add that technical indicator to that mix. And I have done that also to make this more easy on the price chart here for Nvidia, which is just shown. This indicator is also public available. What I've just done here at the bottom is, you see this is a cyclic tuned RSI indicator. So one of our favorite indicators, which uses the long-term cycle on the weekly to fine-tune or to color the background areas. So the background areas in green indicate when the long-term weekly cycle is bottoming. And the red colored background indicates when the long-term weekly is topping. Yeah, so you would look out for situations, and the signal line is then the daily you see here. You would look out for situations when the signal from the daily, let's start here in the past, sorry. When the signal from the past generates a signal in direction of the weekly configuration. So a daily sell signal is triggered here in this red shaded timing window, and the red shade means the weekly is also topping, while the daily is now indicating that sell signal, which exactly happened here at the top. So this would be a valid sell signal, and then you wait until the background turns green, which shows us that from the long cycles now the weekly is in the bottoming area. And then once the signal line from the daily crosses above the channel, which happens 1, 2, 3 times. So here the 3 buy signals, and here another 2 buy signals. So at this bottoming range here, we generated the buy signals, and then the next sell signal triggered here, which then gave us more flat configuration. And we are now in that window, and this is what I wanted to share with you. This is where we are today if we take into account weekly and daily cycles on a technical perspective. So the red indicator shows us that since February this year, the weekly indicates the technical condition is overbought. I mean, no surprise. But since February, not before, so it has not signaled in October, November, December that we have been overbought. So overbought. Here, it only shows since February, so for the past 4 weeks. Then we had the first sell signal here, and then it generated, that was also last week, another sell signal where from the daily we have now broken below the upper channel in the context of a topping weekly cycle. So that's how you read it. That's what I wanted to share with you today, to give you an idea and an update on Nvidia cycles. I think we will hear some news anyhow today from the company, but as said, news from the company are just noise for cycle analysts, so I don't pay too much attention to the news which will come out today. I wanted to share you, as Nvidia is more or less everywhere discussed. For sure, we also need to discuss the cycles on Nvidia. As said, that was the session for today. Again, I have pre-recorded it just this afternoon today, so it's very fresh, but I did not have the chance to join you live in the evening today. So please excuse, please join next time, as I always favor to have some live sessions and conversation with you. But thanks for sneaking in today. I hope you like today's analysis on Nvidia, and do your extended research, please, on your own to find your clues. Thanks for today. Have a nice week and see you soon. Bye.